How did a German engineer testing a military Jeep in the snow end up destroying an entire era of rally racing? The answer wasn't a bigger engine or a more talented driver. It was a hollow shaft bolted inside a gearbox, quietly solving a problem the rest of the motorsport world didn't even know it had. This is the story of the Audi Quattro, and how permanent four-wheel drive turned a decades-old rally tradition into an overnight relic. In the winter of 1976, Audi chassis engineer Jörg Benzinger was in Scandinavia testing the VW Iltis, a lightweight military four-wheel drive vehicle Audi had developed for the German army. Watching the Iltis shrug off icy, snow-covered roads that left conventional cars stranded, Benzinger had a simple but radical idea. What if that same four-wheel drive traction could be built into a proper performance road car, and eventually, a rally car? At the time, this idea ran completely against motorsport convention. Rally cars in the 1970s were, without exception, either rear-wheel drive or front-wheel drive. Four-wheel drive systems were considered too heavy, too complex, and too crude for competitive handling, better suited to farm trucks and military transport than a car built to win races. Benzinger pitched the concept in February 1977 to Ferdinand Piëch, Audi's head of research and development, and Walter Tresser, the company's director of pre-development. Piëch, a man with an almost obsessive appetite for radical engineering, saw the potential immediately and greenlit the project that same year, giving it the internal codename 262. The team built a prototype by grafting the Iltis's four-wheel drive hardware into a modified Audi 80, and the results in testing were dramatic. But the first version had an obvious flaw. Because it borrowed the Iltis's simple locked axle setup with no center differential, the prototype behaved erratically on dry pavement, jumping and skipping through tight turns as the front and rear axles fought each other for grip. That flaw threatened to kill the entire project, until transmission engineer Franz Tengler proposed an elegant solution, a hollow secondary shaft running through the gearbox, allowing power to be split to a front differential and a rear differential simultaneously, with a lockable center differential mediating between them. It was compact, added relatively little weight, and, critically, it let the car behave normally on dry roads while still delivering full four-wheel traction the moment conditions turned slippery. That single piece of engineering turned Benzinger's rough idea into a genuinely viable performance car, and Audi called it Quattro, Italian for four. The production Audi Quattro debuted at the Geneva Motor Show on March 3, 1980, wrapped in a boxy, aggressive two-door coupe body, styled by Martin Smith, powered by a turbocharged 2.1-liter five-cylinder engine. On paper, its specifications didn't look revolutionary. Respectable turbocharged power, a fairly ordinary chassis. What made it remarkable was underneath, permanent four-wheel drive, in a lightweight road car, at a time when every other manufacturer treated four-wheel drive as something reserved for trucks and off-roaders. To understand why this mattered so much in motorsport, you have to understand what rally cars looked like before the Quattro arrived. Frontline World Rally Championship contenders through the late 1970s were almost universally rear-wheel drive. Cars like the Ford Escort and Fiat 131 Abarth, sending power to two wheels only, relying entirely on driver skill and mechanical grip to put power down on loose gravel, mud, and ice. On slick or snow-covered stages, these cars required constant, delicate throttle and steering correction just to keep from spinning, and a driver's smallest miscalculation on a wet hairpin could end a stage, or a season, in a ditch. Four-wheel drive had barely been attempted in serious international rallying, partly because of the added weight and complexity, and partly because FIA regulations of the era didn't even permit it. That changed at the start of the 1980 season, when rulemakers relaxed the restrictions on four-wheel drive rally cars, and Audi, having quietly developed the technology for years, was the only manufacturer ready to capitalize immediately. The Quattro entered its first rally, the Jenner Rally in Austria, in January 1981, and won outright on its competitive debut. A month later, Finnish driver Hannu Mikkola and co-driver Arne Hertz took the Quattro's first World Rally Championship victory at the Swedish Rally, dominating a field of rear-wheel drive machinery on exactly the kind of snow and ice where the Quattro's advantage was most brutal. Later that same season, Audi's other driver, Frenchwoman Michèle Mouton, won the Rally San Remo outright, becoming the first woman ever to win a round of the World Rally Championship, and doing it in the same all-wheel drive machine that was quietly rewriting the sport's rulebook. On loose, slippery, or snow-covered stages, the physical advantage was overwhelming. Where a rear-wheel drive car had to carefully modulate throttle to avoid spinning its rear tires, the Quattro could put power down through all 4 contact patches simultaneously, accelerating out of corners at a rate rival teams simply couldn't match, regardless of driver talent. Rear-wheel drive teams could out-corner the Quattro on smooth, dry tarmac stages where mechanical grip mattered more than raw traction, but the moment a rally turned to gravel, snow, or rain, the contest became lopsided. Audi built on that advantage relentlessly. In 1982, the company won its first manufacturer's World Rally Championship title. In 1983, Hannu Mikkola became the first driver ever to win the World Rally Championship in a 4-wheel drive car. In 1984, Stig Blomqvist repeated the feat, claiming both the driver's and manufacturer's titles in the same season, driving the further evolved Audi Sport Quattro. Audi's rivals didn't stay in denial for long. By the mid-1980s, Peugeot had brought its own 4-wheel drive 205 Turbo 16 to the WRC, followed by Lancia's 4-wheel drive Delta S4. An entire generation of rear-wheel drive rally cars was rendered obsolete within a few short seasons, replaced by a wave of all-wheel drive machinery directly inspired by what Bensinger, Piëch, Trezer, and Tengler had built. It's a rare thing in motorsport history for one manufacturer's engineering decision to make an entire category of competitor instantly outdated, but that's exactly what the Quattro did to conventional rally cars in barely half a decade. The Quattro wasn't without its costs. Early cars were heavier than their rear-wheel drive rivals. The drivetrain added real mechanical complexity, and Audi's 4-wheel drive rally program eventually collided with the increasingly extreme, increasingly dangerous Group B era that would be banned entirely after a string of fatal accidents in 1986. But none of that erased what the Quattro had already proven on the world stage. Before 1980, permanent 4-wheel drive in a performance car was considered impractical, heavy, and unnecessary for anything but off-road use. Audi's engineers proved otherwise, and by the end of the decade, every serious rally manufacturer on Earth had been forced to follow them down the same road, one built, quite literally, around a hollow shaft bolted inside a gearbox. A road car, born from a snowy test of a military Jeep, ended up permanently changing what a competitive rally car was required to be, proving that sometimes the most disruptive idea in motorsport isn't a faster engine, but a smarter way of putting the power you already have down onto the road.